I have to do all of this over again simply because I chose the wrong recording output. I'm having a wellness day. I'm just relaxing, cozy in my bed here. I'd like to tell you guys about something. Am I zoomed in? Oops, that's a fan. With recent videos coming out on YouTube, I had a little story of my own to tell. I wrote a script here, so if you see me looking down, this is what I'm looking at, but let me zoom in a bit. Oh, wait. That's good. My little sleep mask. Music has always been something that I had a bittersweet relationship in terms of my personal expression. I grew up in a lot of different environments, some that allowed me to explore as many creative venues as possible, while others made me feel incredibly isolated. I actually used to want to rap as a child, if you could believe it or not. This creative flame eventually got dimmer and dimmer, as the older I got. I had different interests, but electronic was starting to become this heavy FM synthesis, saturation-filled dreamscape around, like 2011, I should say. And around 17, I finally got Ableton, and I spent a lot of my high school years just learning that. Every day during and after school, I'd constantly work on learning Ableton and making tracks. And I definitely wasn't good when I started. I didn't have any classical training or anything like that. I never took any music classes besides, whatever they did with the recorder in elementary school. But this was a foreshadowing of events that eventually came up in my life. I was staying up late just to work on music. I remember one time I probably spent a good 36 hours just trying to make a song, pretty much like a remix to whatever. Also not having the best practices with volume. I blew my eardrums out a lot. I paid a lot less attention in class because all I really wanted to do was work on bettering my sound. A handful of teachers though, and peers, had told me that I had a lot of potential. Even one of them told me that, I was probably gonna be something in life pretty fast. I really wanted to be something, especially since I was so young. I figured if I worked on this now, I really wouldn't have to worry about anything for the rest of my life. I barely graduated at 18, and I wasn't really heading anywhere in my life besides doing this music thing, so I eventually had a job at a place that rhymed with Paul Blart. It was a night shift job. While I was working this night shift job and while also juggling a relationship, I had this idea for an album. Throughout the rest of that year, I'd work day and night on this album. Throughout me making this album though, I had gone through some severe trauma with the relationship I was in, and it eventually pivoted every moment, every decision I made since then. This is where I want to start emphasizing the importance of dealing with your emotions. Before this trauma, I had quit my job because I felt like this album was gonna propel me into not having to need a minimum wage job anymore. It's a weird thought now that that's so far away from what the truth actually was. After this trauma, it took me a while to find a new job, and I say a while, it was a couple months, but that was very important months for the album. It was something that was kind of a given. This kind of felt like my coming of age moment. Instead of learning a lesson and moving forward though, I kind of just stayed in my room drinking and playing video games, working on the album in between both of those, maybe even during drinking. I projected a lot of my emotions into that album, and eventually it came out on December 20th, titled Crystal Skins and Cardinal Sins. It's a 13-song, nearly hour-long album that kind of showcases what I was doing so far. Because I spent all the time pushing people away and isolating myself, essentially not getting help, got no recognition, and very quickly sinked into an obscurity that I'd have to live with, which is completely fine now. I realized that this was something that I needed to do anyways. I'm still kind of proud of it. Honestly, I will continue to be proud of it for all its flaws that it has. Some songs drag on too long. There's mixing issues, there's structure issues, obviously, but it's still something I like. I believed at the time that I could put something out that I'm passionate about and people would just come to it. And that's a very naive thought. Regardless of how any of us work, how hard we work, or the amount of time we put into something. It's never a given that anyone will come to your attention. I know that sucks. It's just something that we have to learn to deal with as creators. And never mind the marketing that I'd have to work with people or networking. I figured I could do all that myself, and I lacked in every regard, and the album had to suffer because of it. And that's completely fine. It's just a lesson to learn. I figured I could fix my problems by just gaining an audience and dealing with it that way, which is very naive. This might sound like a hindsight thing. Of course, I wouldn't want to do that. It seems like a stupid idea. But I want you to think about how a lot of us view success stories, about the struggling artists. I'm sure it's burned into a lot of our minds that people isolate themselves or put all their passion and heartbreak and struggle into their albums. That fear of failure makes us feel like we can't slow down. Call it vanity or ego. I simply just call it self-preservation and being a human being. Situations like, work made me miserable, so I need to get away from work entirely and just hope music will save me. Or people betrayed my trust, so I must disconnect my contact with the world to make a point that I can do this all on my own. I eventually did get a job right before the end of my album. I got a job at the Jeff Bezos building. It's a place that bounced my hours around, which wasn't really good for my mental health. After the album came out, I was offered to split rent with some people. I figured this would be my solution to my problems. Change of scenery, an opportunity to have spaces to record, and just a chance to be me, whoever me was at the time. A few months later, we eventually moved in, and I realized how much there's something in my eye. I realized that. A few months later, we moved in, and I quickly realized that I had made a mistake. I falsely thought I had security with people I didn't really get along with. I was dealing with a commute that was just stressing me out, and I moved away from my home to be not too far, but far enough to where I didn't have any friends or family. And I did want to prove that I was doing good alone. So this was fine for me up until I started thinking of my problems. A couple months into moving in, I quit my job, and I eventually started doing food delivery, thinking, I can just do this for a little while and try and get a new job in the meantime. But I was delivering food for 2 years. Right before I quit the Jeff Bezos job, I had started working on an EP. As a spiritual continuation of Crystal Skins, previously Uncharted was a 5-song EP that was supposed to be grander and more intense in sound design and had greater ambition. What crept into my creative process, unfortunately, was my past traumas. It eventually took a toll on my actual creative process. Once the EP came out, even at the time, it sort of kind of felt just okay. Now it kind of feels like a slightly embarrassing attempt at a dynamic, melodic, neuro-based album that more or less just sounds like a loud, dynamic-less cry for help. Despite that, I still like bits and pieces of it. It feels a bit cathartic that I've slowly grown, first of all, but I can't help but pat myself on the back because I was still using the laptop that I had at the time. Believe it or not, I think this thing runs better than that. And because of that limitation, I did project a lot of what I was feeling at the time. You can hear it a lot in every song, honestly. Even the one where my vocal mix was very uncompressed and loud. But my mental state had no longer served the music the way it did previously. I developed an anxiety because I wasn't earning rent fast enough. I was waiting until the end of the month to earn rent, and then I'd scramble to earn it, and then I'd do it again every month. I was constantly having meltdowns, as embarrassing as it is to say right now. Like, I'm far removed from that person, but it's still not flattering to say that I was in mental anguish constantly. My music writing was still there, but after failed attempt after failed attempt, I figured the thing that would save me again was another album. All this was happening at the same time I was making very rash decisions, and I was refusing to help myself still because I feel like I couldn't afford it, and I felt like there wasn't really anyone to turn to because obviously I had driven myself away, so a lot of it was just efforts as a cry for help. I was also burning bridges and frankly just making people uncomfortable. Eventually, after living in that apartment for 2 years, I had moved out back home with my parents. Classic story. I also started a relationship. She's here in spirit, but I have the whole bed right now, so I was also trying to afford marketing for this album which I thought was gonna come out way sooner. I had a single out and I put it out, and the artwork looks very good. The song is just okay. I think it dragged out way too long. I finally realized after all that time that it was time to get my life back together. I was slowly juggling jobs. There was a few that were taking a toll on my body that I just couldn't handle, and I had another one at a grocery store for a good while. I made a good effort to eat and exercise, but still I wasn't getting the help I needed. I attempted therapy once. It was with a person that was free with my insurance. Eventually, she just wasn't a good match. She also perpetuated behavior that was very destructive in my life. She encouraged a good bit of it, and I think she was intrigued about how I was messing myself up, I guess. When I stopped seeing this therapist, I had eventually made enough mistakes in my life to cause another giant trauma. I know I'm being very vague about these things, and that's very deliberate because one, they're very hard to talk about, and two, I want to respect the people behind these events. Right before this trauma occurred, I had got myself a job that allowed me mentally and physically to be able to create stuff after work. This trauma happened at the beginning of one year, and at the very end, me and my girlfriend had gotten an apartment. This apartment was closer to my job. It allowed me to have the thought that I could finally create in a space that was my own. But after getting used to my new environment, I started posting here once a week, and eventually my past traumas came right back because I wasn't dealing with them, and I fell into a really, really bad depression that I hadn't really seen in a very long time. I want to pause this discussion for a second and put into perspective how much I was working when I began to produce to the creative output of that moment was. And I know real life gets in the way, but if you're in a good mental state, you always find a way. I wasn't in a good mental state, so I had no need to create. I felt like who was gonna see this and who would actually care, and it's just a very unfortunate place I was in. I was finally at a place in my life. I felt like I had enough financial backing and determination to get therapy. Finally, I finally found a therapist after trying really hard. And if you're trying to find a therapist, believe me, I know it's hard, but all that hard work will be paid off. Week after week, I slowly was finding things out about myself that I didn't realize were there, and I finally reached a level of self-reliance. It took me nearly 6 years to get the help that I needed. If there's anything I'd like to tell myself, it's simply to get proper help before it gets too late. But I'm also here right now to say that I can't go back and tell myself that it's never too late to start over and get the help that you need. If you feel like you don't, at least reflect on where you are in life. Reflect on who you can talk to and what it means for your creative process. I've now released a handful of videos this year. Some of them are I'm still proud of. There's other ones where, you know, I just need to put things out for the week because I made that a goal. Even though I missed the week where Scrapbook episode 1 was coming out because of YouTube delays, but whatever. I plan on releasing plenty more. I plan on growing and getting better and better. It doesn't really matter anymore who I reach, so long as someone somewhere gets something from it. I want to be able to tell stories and make friends through creating, and I want to feel that sense of accomplishment just by growing. If anyone watching can take at least one thing away from this, as cheesy as it sounds, you do not serve the music serves you. It's okay to take time away to better yourself. It'll always be around for you to come back to. Music has been around since probably even before human. You imagine a dinosaur playing a little Flintstone instrument? You have no obligation to feel pressure to continue because you feel like your pain will create better music. You can have stories to tell while feeling stable in your life. It takes a lot of strength to recognize that something needs to be done, so if results don't happen immediately, that's okay. As much as many of us, including myself, feel that it's a race to see who can prove themselves the fastest, it's really about creating and cultivating something that you can be proud of. I really do hope you're all well. Just stay in tune with yourself. I think it's important in life. With all that being said, after 2 takes, I think I'm just ready for a nap, so I think that's what I'm gonna do. honk snoo. Z z z. E z z z z. Sleep, sleep, sleep. I'm going to bed. Good night. Goodbye. This is me in bed. Render head. Render bed.